The autumn light that draped itself across Casterly Rock carried a faint chill, as though the sea winds below had clawed their way up the cliff face and seeped into every stone gallery. Tyrion Lannister's chamber, an alcove carved out of the ancient fortress's side, was narrow, windowless, and poorly lit, save for a single brazier thrumming red-gold in the gloom. At its center, he sat hunched over a clutter of vellum sheets, pewter goblets, and half-melted candles that leaked tallow like bleached tears across the table. Paper crackled between his broad, blunt fingers. The letter was decades old. He could feel time itself in the brittle fibers. But the ink of Joanna Lannister's hand had not yet surrendered to dust. The script was poised, elegant, every loop deliberate. Tyrion's eyes traced each line again, though he could have recited them by rote now. My dearest friend, all else in this world may wither, yet our blood, and the secrets we guard, persist. The child quickens in me. If fate is kind, he will bear fire as bright as any dragon's. No name, no address. Only a sigil half rubbed away by the years. But at the bottom, hidden beneath a fold, lingered the faint impression of 3 heads coiling into one, the Targaryen crest, its ink disguised under a smear of sealing wax. He had found the letter in a compartment of his father's study, tucked behind iron-bound ledgers. Tywin Lannister kept everything ordered, every coin and contract precisely where it belonged. So why hide this? Tyrion tapped the parchment with a wine-stained nail. Why file it away beneath pages on grain tariffs? Because even Tywin, it seemed, feared what 3-headed dragons might do to his golden banner. A thud sounded at the door. "Enter," Tyrion called, voice carefully measured. The oak swung on silent hinges, and Varys drifted inside. The spider wore sand-colored robes loose at the sleeves. As nondescript as the man himself was conspicuous. "You wished for company?" Varys asked, shutting the door without stirring a hinge. Light from the brazier limned the eunuch's face, catching a glimmer in his pale blue eyes, eyes that missed very little in any room. Tyrion raised a goblet, swirling red wine. "Company, perhaps. Answers, assuredly. You traffic in both, I'm told." Varys's smile was slight. "Whispers adore a host who feeds them." He crossed the chamber, fingertips brushing curios on a shelf. An ivory griffin, a jade lion, before turning to the table. "And what do we ponder this evening?" Tyrion slid the letter forward. "My mother's quill, my father's hiding place. Your speciality, Varys, secrets." Silence knitted between them. The eunuch picked up the parchment, his expression smoothing into polite intrigue, yet Tyrion's sharpened gaze caught a flicker, guarded recognition. Before calm returned, Varys set the letter down. A relic of Lady Joanna. Her words hold poignancy still. "Besintrol." "Poignancy," Tyrion echoed, savoring the taste of it. A mother's whisper to a friend. And this crest. Perhaps a jest. Varys' tone was gentle, the suggestion carefully modest. Noble women fancied little encryptions once. "Perhaps," Tyrion allowed, though his lips curved in something colder than humor. But the friend in question, signed with the symbol of House Targaryen, thinly veiled. Rhaella's handmaid, maybe. Or the queen herself. He leaned back, chair creaking. "Tell me, Varys, why would Tywin Lannister hide such a letter if it were mere courtly gossip?" "Dimdares." The eunuch's palm spread. Tywin was a man of many secrets. Tyrion swallowed wine. "And I think this one stung him worse than gold can salve." Varys studied him, eyes glinting. "What do you hope to find in old paper, my lord?" "Truth," Tyrion said softly. "Of who my mother trusted. And why she wrote that her child might bear fire." He splayed his stubby fingers. "I was born twisted, but I did not burn. Not then. No one her. A torch gutters in a draught. Shadows capered across the walls. And for an instant, Tyrion felt as though they formed wings, a trio of wings beating in time with his pulse. Madness, surely. Yet the chill in his bones was different from the sea wind's chill. This was a cold that came when certainty cracked, and something vast peered through the fissure. Varys lowered his head. Some truths, once unearthed, undermine kingdoms. Kingdoms rot when lies are mortar. Tyrion rose, pressing palms to the table's edge. "Tell me what you know." Footsteps in the hall passed. Muffled voices. Varys waited until they faded. Then, almost inaudibly, "The night your mother died, the midwife who attended her vanished." A Targaryen loyalist midwife, rumored, at least, and Tywin spent a year scouring the Reach for her. She was never found. Tyrion's breath hitched. He remembered maids whispering of that bloody birth, of how Tywin refused to speak of his wife's death. Why search for her? Unless indeed. Varys' voice softened. "Some say Tywin feared the midwife would claim your true sire was not her lady's husband." The room seemed to tilt. Tyrion steadied himself, knuckles white. "My father, King Aerys." The words tasted of iron. Madness and fire danced in every Targaryen tale. Dragons consumed themselves and their kin with equal ease. Could such blood run in him? He was called the Mad King. Varys lifted one shoulder. Yet in youth he was handsome, and Joanna served at court. Enough. Tyrion forced breath into his lungs. Speculation proves nothing. He folded the letter and tucked it inside his doublet. "I need proof." Varys' reply came like a sigh. "Proof lies across the world, I fear. In Valyria's favored tongues, in Dragonflame." "Nah. Then that is where I'm bound." Tyrion drained the goblet. "In the morning I ride for Old Town. The Citadel keeps archives more ancient than Casterly Rock shame." Varys inclined his head. "Old Town is far, and quieter than King's Landing," Tyrion said. "Less eyes except yours, of course." He offered the eunuch a sardonic bow. "I trust you'll keep this out of the wrong ears." "The realm has many ears," Varys murmured. "I can only muffle some." "Do so." Tyrion extinguished a candle with his thumb and forefinger, the wick hissing. "If dragons live again, I intend to hear them roar with my own ears, not through whispers." And Ivanton. The following dawn, a pale haze draped the Westerlands. Tyrion rode east on a stout gelding, cloak snapping in a brisk wind as the rock shrank behind him, a gilded phantom above the surf. His escort numbered 3. Podrick Payne, earnest and wide-eyed. Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, half asleep in his saddle. And one mute guard, whose loyalty Tywin had sold years prior. Tyrion trusted none but Pod, yet Bronn's pragmatism had its uses, and the mute could not spread tales he could not tell. They crossed harvest fields where small folk bound sheaves of wheat under flapping banners crimson and gold. Yet wherever Tyrion looked he now saw, beneath lions rampant, the ash-white sigil of the dragon, faint as a scar. The notion haunted every mile, threading his thoughts until day blurred to dusk, and the river road dwindled into mire. Nights they camped in thickets. Tyrion sat by the fire turning the letter over, seeking new meaning in each loop of ink. Flames licked logs. Sometimes the sparks coalesced in the air, tiny three-headed shapes that vanished the instant he blinked. Bronn muttered of damp wood. Podrick asked timid questions about Old Town's library. Tyrion offered curt answers, for he feared to voice what churned inside him. A longing he had never felt even for Casterly Rock's craggy halls. Something called beyond the horizon, beckoning like gold none could weigh. 10 days on. The spires of Old Town rose before them. Slabs of pale stone shouldering sky. The high tower's beacon turning dusk to molten silver. Bells tolled vespers. The streets, wide and cobbled, smelled of salt and incense. Tyrion paid for rooms at an inn fit for maesters who prized privacy and good wine over frippery. By torchlight, he penned letters securing meetings with Archmaester Belthas, said to preside over histories of birth and bloodlines. Belthas received him 2 days later within the Citadel's labyrinth of lecture halls. The Archmaester was tall, stooped, with hair white as parchment edges. The chain about his neck clinked with links of gold, silver, electrum. He led Tyrion beneath ribs of vaulted stone to a reading room, stacked with scrolls bound in leather that smelled of oil and thyme. "You request pre-conquest registries?" Belthas asked, adjusting iron spectacles. "And birthing ledgers from the last years of King Aerys?" "I do," Tyrion said, offering a purse heavy with silver stags. "For study, Of course. Belthus weighed the purse in one bony hand, then pulled a key the size of a dagger from his sleeve. He unlocked a cabinet, withdrawing a sheaf of brittle pages inked in Valyrian glyphs. Many records burned during Robert's rebellion. These survived because few can read them. Tyrion's pulse hammered. He spread the pages on a desk. The glyphs coiled like serpents, yet Tyrion had studied enough Valyrian to parse names. Rhaella, daughter of Jaehaerys. Joanna, of House Lannister. Lines connected in coded numerals. Births, miscarriages, stillbirths, living issue. A final note, sigilled by a scarlet dragon foretold. Male child. Lunar month 3rd of winter, born in secret. No name. No mother recorded. Only initials JL. He traced the characters thrice before daring to breathe. Archmaester, would you translate these notations for me? I fear my Valyrian is. Belthus peered closer. N. Extraneous entry. Interesting. He coughed. It appears to record a male infant, blood of the dragon, delivered outside customary rites. The mother's initials are indeed JL, the sire denoted by crown glyph. King Aerys himself. Tyrion's vision swam. He steadied himself with both hands, nails scraping wood. Thank you, he managed. Belthus' curiosity sparked behind his lenses. What interest, may I ask, does House Lannister take in such matters? My house values history, Tyrion replied. Even the awkward bits. He forced a jesting tone but felt airless. He copied the glyphs onto fresh parchment, sealing them under wax.I. Belthus locked the originals away, content with his silver. Tyrion departed the citadel, cloud pale beneath hooded cloak, Belthus' words tolling like bells in his skull. Blood of the dragon. If the ledger spoke true, his father's hatred had deeper root than dwarfism. Tywin had raised Aerys' son under his own roof, a living emblem of a queen's humiliation. No wonder his father's eyes had burned with that clipped contempt. At the inn, Tyrion summoned Bronn and Podrick. We sail at dawn, he told them, voice stripped of ornament. Hire a fast ship for Volantis. No, for Meereen. Podrick blinked, but Bronn's brows lifted in dark amusement. Making for the Dragon Queen, are we? Bronn asked. Must be serious coin in it. Coin, dragons, death. It's all the same to you, Tyrion said. I pay. You guard. That's our accord. Fair. Bronn spat in his palm and extended it. Tyrion ignored the gesture. Podrick's confusion wilted into determination. Aye, my lord. I'll see to provisions. Left alone, Tyrion opened a window lattice. A gauzy moon hung over Old Town's roofs. Somewhere beyond the reach, across leagues of sea and sand, Daenerys' stormborn commanded creatures only storybooks should hold. Yet the ledger claimed their blood might be his as well, might lend him kinship deeper than any king's decree. He closed his eyes, and in the hush felt the faintest echo of wings, great wings beating in hollow darkness. A rumble, not of thunder, but of some colossal, throat-exhaling heat. He whispered a single word into the night. Rhaegal. The name thrummed on his tongue like warm metal, though he could not say why he chose that dragon over its brothers. Perhaps because folk said Rhaegal's scales were green as summer grass, green as the western hills that hemmed Casterly Rock. Or perhaps his choice had no reason mortal men could parse. The sound simply fit inside him, as though carved there before breath or bone. Dow. Their ship, Sea Swan, left Old Town's harbor under a sky bruised violet with dawn. Orange lanterns swayed from the wharf, scattered reflections along the Honeywine where gulls shrieked their hunger. Tyrion stood at the prow, clutching a rail slick with dew, cloak snapping around him. Bronn gambled below decks with sailors. Podrick sprinkled dried mint along the hold to mask bilge stench. The mute guard lingered silently near the mast, gaze blank as always. Tyrion wondered if that blankness hid judgment or simple emptiness. Either way, the man served. By midday, Old Town's tower dwindled behind haze, swallowed by the roiling jade of the sunset sea. Waves slapped hull planks, rhythmic and steadying. Tyrion poured himself diluted wine. Sea travel dulled appetite for heavier draughts, and laid out the ledger copy, the letter, and his own hasty notes across a barrel. Wind threatened to steal sheets, but he pinned corners with lead seals. He traced each scrap, seeking alignment, a cipher only living blood might solve. Yet parchment yielded little more than it had. Joanna had written a fire as bright as any dragon's. The ledger claimed a secret male child. Could there have been two? Or had Joanna disguised herself within the palace in her final months? Tyrion considered tales of Aerys's infatuation with Tywin's wife, of how the king once fondled her at court. Tywin had resigned his hand soon after, rumor said, though he later returned. Perhaps Joanna's death in childbed was not misfortune but murder. If Tywin had sought to silence scandal, the thought made Tyrion's stomach lurch harder than the waves. He crumpled a page, then smoothed it, breathing slow. Proof, he reminded himself. The past lay fixed, only the future could bend. And across the sea waited the one person whose blood, if kin to his, might burn clear. Night fell. The sea swan rocked under constellations, Tyrion knew from books, but had seldom seen so sharp. A salt-keened wind rattled seams. Tyrion dozed against a coil of ropes. Dreamscapes unfurled. Stone corridors lit by wildfire green. Doors edged with dragon glass, and beyond them, a vast cavern where three serpentine silhouettes coiled around volcanic pillars. Their eyes were twin moons, three sets, staring at him with ancient testing patience. He walked toward the smallest, its scales shimmering dusky emerald. Fear lanced him, yet each step felt like coming home. The beast lowered its wedge head, nostrils flaring. A plume of breath engulfed him. Hot, but harmless. Within the furnace rush he heard a voice. Not words but a pulse. A thrum in blood. Mine. Ours. He reached up, palm trembling, and touched a scale smoother than polished steel. He woke at dawn gasping, palm tingling. Above, the horizon blazed ruby and gold. For a moment, the boundary between dream and waking blurred so thoroughly that Tyrion half expected a dragon to crest the sea swells beside the ship. But only gulls rode the wind, their cries harsh and ordinary. Podrick found him soon after. Land ahead, my lord. Volantis by dusk, the captain says. Tell the captain I'll double his coin to bypass Volantis, Tyrion replied, wiping sweat from his lip. We sail straight through the strait and down the coast. No delays. Podrick hesitated. Supplies are less dear than time, Tyrion said. We'll resupply at New Giaz if need be. The lad shuffled away, nodding. Tyrion returned to the rail. In the dream, the dragon had not scorched him, had chosen him. He scowled into the spray, half ashamed at how that wild hope set his heart faster than any noble lady's favor ever had. A dwarf, an imp, mocked since cradle. Yet a dragon had bowed its mighty head in greeting. Madness. And yet, perhaps blood knew its own. 2 weeks later, they reached the warm latitudes where summer never fully died. The sea swan traced the coast, passing ports where harpies carved from white stone glared over salted markets. Tyrion stayed mostly in his cabin, reading. And when he slept, the dragon dreams returned, sometimes silent, sometimes thrumming like drums under mountains. Always the green one. Once, flames crackled in the dream, but they did not burn. Rather, they curled about him like a cloak of living silk. When at last marine sandstone pyramids speared the hazy horizon, dusk bled mauve across the sky. Slave ships no longer bobbed in the harbor. Daenerys had ended that trade. But patrol triremes bore her three-headed sigil, and atop the great pyramid, bright as a fallen star, Drogon perched, wings half unfurled. The sight rooted Tyrion where he stood on deck. Drogon's bulk dwarfed watchtowers. Embers glowed between his serrated teeth each time he exhaled. Bronn joined him, whistling low. Big beast. Think she'd let me try a saddle? You value your skin too much, Tyrion murmured. Depends what the pay is. Bronn grinned, but unease flickered behind his bravado. Dock hands guided the sea swan alongside a pier. Tyrion's party disembarked into heat, thick with cumin, sweat, and river silt. Unsullied soldiers in pale tunics met them, spears upright, eyes like shuttered windows. Tyrion produced a letter penned under a false sigil requesting audience. The captain of the guard accepted it, lips unreadable, and gestured them to follow. Night glazed the city in lantern light. They climbed ramp after ramp up the great pyramid, Podrick panting, Bronn cursing softly. Tyrion's legs ached, but his chest felt alight, every breath tight with anticipation, dread, wonder. At the summit, open terraces caught a breeze that smelled of jasmine. Braziers lined a path to a broad dais where Daenerys Targaryen awaited, slim and still, silver gold hair rippling. She wore no crown. Power itself seemed her regalia. To her left stood Grey Worm, to her right Missandei. Behind the queen, sprawled across heated bricks, lay Regal and Viserion, tails coiled like sinuous ropes, eyes half-lidded. Regal, larger now than city gates, raised his head as Tyrion approached. His pupils, black slits within a jade expanse, locked onto Tyrion with predatory focus. But there was something else too, something that felt akin to recognition. The world narrowed to that gaze. Tyrion stopped, heart rattling. Rhaegal's nostrils flared. A low rumble shivered through the terrace stones. Viserion shifted but did not rise. Tyrion knew in marrow the sound was no threat but greeting. Deep, resonant, the note from his dreams. Heat washed over him. He bowed, not to Daenerys, not to the gods, but to the dragon whose breath smelled of furnace and wind. Daenerys stepped forward, surprise widening her violet eyes. "He has never bowed to another save me," she said softly. "The creature has taste," Tyrion replied, words thick. He straightened, meeting her gaze. "Your Grace." "I am Tyrion Lannister," she finished. Something unreadable passed across her face. Calculation? Memory of father's murder? Yet her eyes slid back to Regal, and curiosity kindled. "He knows you." "I dreamed of him before I saw him," Tyrion confessed, unable to sheath truth beneath wit. "And when I said his name, it sounded as if I'd known it since the cradle." Daenerys studied him. Moonlight silvered her hair. Her face held the calm of someone accustomed to impossibilities. "There are odd fires in this world," she murmured. "Come, let us talk." Tyrion followed her along the terrace edge. Heat rose from the bricks, but the air above was cool. Below, Meereen sprawled like a constellation of saffron torches. Dragons exhaled behind them, the sound steady as tide. "Varys writes you are clever," Daenerys said without turning. "That cleverness poisons as easily as it heals." "I heal more often than poison," Tyrion said, "especially when my own hide depends on it." A smile ghosted her lips. She stopped at a low wall. "Why are you here?" He removed Joanna's letter, the ledger copy. "To offer truth," he said, voice bare as the stones beneath. "And perhaps claim it." She accepted the parchment, eyes flitting. Lantern light picked outlines of ink. When she read the ledger glyphs, her breath caught. "These symbols, blood of my father." "So it claims," Tyrion said. He met her gaze head on. "I think we share that blood." Silence. Only the hush of distant crowds, the flutter of torch banners, the deep slow breaths of dragons. Daenerys looked at him, really looked, as if scales and bones might reveal lineage. Then she extended a hand, palm up. "Place your hand atop mine." Perplexed, Tyrion obeyed. Her skin was cool, soft. She closed her fingers around his, and at once he felt a pressure within his chest, like doors unbarred. From the terrace behind, Rhaegal rumbled. Louder, urgent. Wind whipped Daenerys' braid. Her pupils dilated, violet deepening to nightshade. She released his hand. "The blood answers," she whispered. Tyrion's heart thundered. "Does it?" She turned toward the dragons. "Approach him." The Unsullied stirred. Grey Worm's spear tensed. Tyrion approached anyway, step by careful step, until he stood before Rhaegal's brow. The dragon's breaths billowed, hot enough to prickle skin. Green scales overlapped in patterns older than empires. Tyrion raised a trembling hand, inches from the beast's muzzle. Rhaegal dipped his head. Tyrion touched him. The scale under his palm pulsed faint warmth, as though embers glowed beneath. A sound rolled from the dragon. Something like a sigh. vast and content. In that vibration, Tyrion heard what words could never hold: echoes of molten earth, of sky before storms, of memory older than houses or crowns. The connection thrummed so strong he feared his bones might shatter. Behind him, Daenerys inhaled sharply. Viserion's tail scraped stone, disturbed. Rhaegal's head shifted until one golden eye filled Tyrion's vision. In its mirrored depths he saw himself, small, imperfect, yet haloed by the dragon's reflection. For the first time in his life, Tyrion Lannister did not feel small at all. A deep voice, his own, broke the quiet. "I am Tyrion, Targaryen." The terrace stirred with whispers from guards. Yet he did not hear them. Everything inside him was fire and wind. Daenerys stepped forward. "If the blood calls, the world will answer," she said. "But blood alone is not enough. Will you serve House Targaryen?" "I came across the world for just that," Tyrion said, hand still upon Rhaegal. "Though I confess, I hope to serve from a rather different seat than council chamber." Her eyebrow lifted. "You wish to ride?" Tyrion's mouth curved in wonder. "It seems he wishes it too." Rhaegal's rumble was a thunderclap of assent. Daenerys studied the dragon, then Tyrion. The night around them sharpened. Every torch flame appeared brighter, every breeze tinged with smoke. "Dawn," she said at last. "We will take him beyond the walls where sky has room." She placed a hand on his shoulder, light but steady. "Sleep if you can. Tomorrow, the world may change." Tyrion nodded, though he doubted sleep would find him. Fire thrummed under his skin. Wind sang in his ears. In the dragon's eye he had glimpsed the shape of a new self, not son of Tywin the lion, but child of wildfire and storm, riding the currents of a future yet unwritten. He backed away, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. Rhaegal watched, lids half drooping. Then the beast settled, coils folding like titanic cathedrals of green iron. Bronn met him near the stair, face a study in disbelief. "You planning to fly that thing?" "Planning?" Tyrion chuckled, voice shaking. "No, Bronn. Planning's for men who must convince wings to bear them. I believe the wings have already decided." Then he drank in night air, thick with dragon heat. For once the world felt precisely the size it ought to be. Vast enough to house both his broken body and the boundless roar that now stirred behind his ribs. Somewhere distant, bells tolled the hour. And Tyrion Targaryen, as he now dared to name himself, turned toward the dark, toward dawn, toward 5 long hours of sky yet to be written. Gay. Dawn seeped into the great pyramid like the hush before a heartbeat, washing its sandstone flanks with rose-gold light that coaxed last night's torches into meek gray wisps. Tyrion had not slept. He had spent the hours pacing a guest suite high in the western wing, its balcony perched above Meereen's slumbering streets. Every footfall on the marble seemed to echo the drumbeat thunder still quivering in his bones, that deep, resonant note Rhaegal had sung into him. Around the 3rd hour after midnight, he tried reading a treatise on Hiscari contracts, only to find the glyphs swimming like fish across the page. By the 4th he gave up, poured a thimble of sweet arbor red, and watched stars fade behind a paling horizon. The sky's slow transformation felt like an omen fashioned for him alone, night relinquishing dominion to a realm of flame-tinted clouds. When gray-fingered light finally crept through the lattice doors, Grey Worm appeared, silent save for segmented sandals whispering on stone, to escort him. No words passed between them. Unsullied discipline seemed carved from the same basalt as the pyramid itself, and Tyrion was oddly grateful. He could not have managed small talk without scattering his composure to the sand. They descended narrow staircases corkscrewing toward the dragon's terrace. The air warmed perceptibly with each level, until it tasted almost metallic, charged by some ineffable current. At the last landing, Grey Worm stopped, lifted a hand. Tyrion inhaled, then stepped onto the sun-drenched expanse. The terrace bustled with muted preparation. Dozens of Dothraki stable hands, if one could call men who tended winged infernos stable hands, hauled heaps of cured leather harness, steel rings thick as wrist bones, coiled chains wrapped in dragon bone plates. They worked without chatter, communicating via nods and finger snaps. Off to one side, Missandei recorded inventories with a charcoal stylus. Her focus so sharp she seemed to etch the air itself into orderly columns. Daenerys stood near the terrace's midpoint, her pale hair bound in 3 woven tails that caught the sunrise like molten silver thread. Beside her loomed Rhaegal, wings tucked, neck arched, eyes alight with emerald fire. He filled the space as a thunderhead fills a summer sky, restless energy coiled beneath ridged scales. Tyrion reclined farther back in a shallow niche, nostrils steaming. Drogon was absent. A dark titan seldom lingered where watchers could measure him. Tyrion's stride faltered as he drew near. The dragon's gaze tracked him with predatory precision. Heat radiated in suffocating waves, singeing the shallow breaths he dared. Yet underneath the fear pulsed familiarity, an invitation couched within menace. He bowed again, lower this time, small stature allowing his spine to fold almost double. When he rose, Rhaegal's massive head dipped fractionally, acknowledging. Daenerys' lips curved. He has waited. Her voice carried a pitch that was neither awe nor command, but something older, akin to ritual. Are you ready? Ready is a word men use when they cannot retreat. Tyrion said, forcing a crooked smile. So yes, I'm ready. Bronn lounged beyond the knot of unsullied arms folded. His mouth twitched with equal parts delight and morbid curiosity. Podrick hovered beside him, like an anxious squire at tourney. Tyrion caught Podrick's eye. The lad offered a taut nod that trembled around the edges. 2 Dothraki approached, bearing a ladder of ashwood reinforced with steel bands. They planted it against Rhaegal's shoulder where a saddle, if the enormous contraption could be called such, had already been cinched beneath the creature's four-lime joints. The leatherwork gleamed darkly, traced with hammered brass, stirrups forged wide enough to cradle a struggling boar. Tyrion's stomach lurched at the absurd scale of everything. Yet the ladder's rungs were spaced generously, as though someone had foreseen the awkward reach of a shorter rider. "Climb," Daenerys said softly, but the word rippled like a banner unfurling in war wind. Tyrion exhaled once, twice, then set his boot on the lowest rung. The ladder shivered against living sinew. Dotchist. With each upward haul of his arms he felt muscle flex under scales the color of deep forests at dusk. Halfway, hot gusts from Rhaegal's nostrils buffeted him, carrying a scent like lightning-splitting pine resin. By the time he reached the top rung, his shirt clung with sweat, more from awe than exertion. The saddle sat in a hollow between spiny ridges, where the dragon's neck met shoulder blades. Leather bulwarks rose to either side, affording a measure of protection against lateral jolts. Chains threaded through iron-reinforced eyelets, cross-braced by thick cords of woven silk. Tyrion swung a leg with the ungainly grace of a tavern drunk, mounting a cart pony, landing into the seat that seemed at once too wide and somehow fitted. The saddle's front lip pressed against his stomach. His feet barely reached the stirrup hoops, even adjusted to their shortest lengths. He cursed Tywin's bloodline for lacking a few precious inches. Yet when he settled, the contours shaped naturally to his dwarfed frame, as though the hide itself shifted to cushion him. Daenerys ascended briskly behind, taking a narrower perch farther up the spine without ladder or assistance. She grasped a titanium-framed handle embedded between vertebrae ridges. Her poise suggested long familiarity with that precarious roost. "You will guide him with pressure and voice," she instructed over the rumble rising in Rhaegal's chest. "He's intelligent, but he responds first to instinct. Keep your core aligned. When he banks, lean along the wing, not against it." Tyrion nodded, lips paper dry. "And if he decides midair I resemble breakfast, then we make certain you no longer resemble breakfast." She offered a teasing flicker of smile. "Hold fast." Daenerys uttered a single Valyrian command. "Sovs, Rhaegal, rise à toi." Sound exploded, a thunderous crack of leathery membranes unfurling. A hurricane draft spiraling off stone, a seismic churn as hindquarters heaved. The terrace pitched away under Tyrion's boots. One frantic heartbeat later, the pyramid no longer pressed solidity beneath him. Only open sky existed, sky and the furious downdraft of wings, like siege engines. Wind punched his face, snatching breath in icy handfuls. Meereen shrank to a mosaic of ochre roofs and thread-like alleyways. The morning sun, still low, flared over the bay's waters, scattering mirror shards of light. Rhaegal climbed in tight spirals, each pump of wings dropping Tyrion's stomach a dozen feet before inertia caught up. He clung to pommel rings, knuckles bleached bone-white. Daenerys' voice came back through the gale. "Speak to him, Tyrion. He listens." Tyrion swallowed sand-dry dread. "Forward, my friend," he managed, pitching the words into the rushing wind with all the authority he could muster. He pressed his knees inward, not that they reached far. But perhaps the pressure translated. Rhaegal leveled, angling toward the distant mouth of the Skahazadon River, where green water met azure sea. Velocity surged. Tears streamed sideways from Tyrion's eyes. The dragon's exhalations left shimmering contrails that smelled faintly of brimstone. Below, fishermen on skiffs leapt to their feet, pointing. Dogs barked, their cries lost in the beating storm of wings. Meereen's walls receded behind haze. Rhaegal pierced an updraft, tilting. The world tipped 40 degrees. Horizon slipped. Tyrion resisted an urge to grip tighter. Rigid hands hamper balance, he recalled Daenerys saying. Instead, he let his spine follow the dragon's spine, trusting shared center of gravity. A screech tore across the sky. Viserion launched from the terrace, tail streaming like a pale comet. He banked to join, slotting neatly above and behind Rhaegal's right flank. Brotherhood in flight. The sight surprised Tyrion, less than the realization his fear had begun to unravel into wonder. Terror remained, only fools shed it entirely. But wonder swelled, crowding dread to the edges. Rhaegal leveled over churning sea foam. Daenerys leaned toward him, braid whipping. "He will test you. Hold his trust." "Mao." As if heeding, Rhaegal folded wings halfway, diving. Air screamed. Tyrion's stomach bounded into his throat, cheeks flattened. The ocean rushed upward, whitecaps stark at lethal detail. At the last instant, Rhaegal snapped wings wide. The plummet rebounded into a soaring arc, so abrupt Tyrion's vision speckled. Spray misted his face, brine and char. He laughed. It burst unbidden. A raw howl ripped from years of chambered scorn and restraint. The sound mingled with the dragon's roars, indistinguishable. In that flash, he grasped what the silver princes of old Valyria must have felt. Not godhood precisely, but the loosening of mortal chains. To ride a dragon was not dominion over the beast. It was submission to a greater rhythm. A pact where rider and mount bled boundaries until sky became an extension of self. Hours seemed to compress into the span of heartbeat avalanches and lullaby glides. They followed the coastline southward, scouting the patchwork of newly freed fields where emancipated labor toiled under token pay. Rather than slave whip, Daenerys pointed out irrigation ditches financed by seized slaver wealth. Tyrion studied them, mind already calculating yields, logistics of defending such nascent prosperity, if Yunkai or Volantis sought revenge. Yet each time the dragon banked, he lost himself anew in pure sensation, thoughts severed by the slide of horizon. At length Daenerys guided Rhaegal inland toward a rocky plateau, seldom frequented by shepherds. Cracked basalt jutted from sparse scrub, heat shimmered between fissures. Viserion touched down first, sending dust storms spiraling. Rhaegal landed beside, joints absorbing titanic weight in a ripple. When wings folded, the silence felt cavernous, broken only by twin bellows of cooling furnace breath. Tyrion dismounted via rigged rope ladder unrolled by a Dothraki outrider who had galloped up from some camouflaged encampment. His legs wobbled as though his bones had been replaced by stiff pudding. Daenerys dropped gracefully, barely bending knees. She strode to him. "Your first flight lasted longer than mine. Perhaps because I lacked older brothers to drop me from a tower as rehearsal," he quipped between ragged breaths. The world still rotated sluggishly. He pressed a hand to basalt. Her amusement softened. She placed a palm over his heart. "Feel." He did. The cadence beneath her hand hammered not only with exertion, but with something wilder, attuned. Then he noticed her pulse likewise thrummed, the two beats almost synchronous. He glanced up. "A bond forged in flame?" he asked. "In sky," she corrected softly. "Flame comes later." An unspoken understanding coalesced there on the wind-scoured plateau. They were kin now, whether by blood or by right of dragonfire. Neither could yet prove lineage to parchment satisfaction. Still, the creatures had judged. They shared water, then bread sweetened with dried fruits. The dragons basked, eyelids sliding over cat's eye slits. When shadows telescoped across the plain, Daenerys whistled a command. Rhaegal and Viserion leapt skyward, wheeling back toward Meereen. She and Tyrion mounted a pair of pale palfreys awaiting them, and set off at a trot down an ochre trail cut by cavalry patrols. Wind cooled sweat. Tyrion's head swam with shapes of currents he'd ridden, loops carved across the air like sigils. He kept replaying a single moment. When Rhaegal had leveled after that first heart-rending dive. And for a breath he had felt weightless. Every bruise Tywin's words ever left burned away under sunlit speed. Could ecstasy alone rewrite a man? Perhaps not, but it had inked fresh ambitions deep as Valyrian steel. They spoke little on the ride back. The day's marvel hung between them like a shared secret yet too vast for casual speech. As they re-entered Meereen's outer market district, throngs parted in awed silence around their modest escort of Unsullied. Even without dragons overhead, word traveled fast. The queen had flown with a new rider. Inside the pyramid, Missandei met them with bowed head. "Visitors await, your grace." Daenerys' brows knit. "Who?" "Envoys from Korth, accompanied by Prince Quentyn Martell of Dorne. They request immediate audience." Daenerys sighed, a gust of frustration quickly masked by regal composure. She glanced to Tyrion. "Reality intrudes. Will you join my council chamber? Your insights into Dornish motivations may prove useful, and Korthian bankers seldom speak plainly." Tyrion considered, then nodded. "Allow me 10 minutes to clean the plateau from my face. I'd rather not negotiate dripping lizard sweat onto your marble floor." She granted him leave. As Tyrion limped toward his chambers, he glimpsed Bronn waiting near a mural of Giscari warlords. The sellsword lifted a brow. Tyrion answered with a subtle nod. Bronn fell into step. "Still alive," Bronn noted lightly. "I owe Pod 2 silver stags. You should have wagered limbs, not life. Dragons appear to favor intact riders. Give it time." Bronn's gaze flicked up the stairwell, mine likely calculating leverage in case of sudden falls. "So, you're a prince now? Brother to the Dragon Queen?" "I am uncertain what I am," Tyrion admitted. "But titles are less interesting than potential. For instance, imagine 3 dragons unchained above the battlefield, each guided by allied intellect rather than primal impulse." Bronn whistled. "I imagine charred corpses and lords pissing their small clothes. Good for intimidation, bad for spoils if everything's ash." "True," Tyrion agreed. "But a burnt holdfast is still territory removed from an enemy's grasp. Rebuilding can be negotiated." "And, assuming survivors." Bronn's shrug suggested he placed low odds on such nuance. Tyrion parted from him at a juncture lined by fountains breathing perfumed mist. Inside his suite, he stripped flight-soaked garments, sponged salt crust from beard, donned a fresh doublet quilted pale green under gold thread dragons. As if some subconscious tailor anticipated this day, he paused before a bronze mirror, studying the reflection. No taller, no fairer, still warped hip and outsized head. Yet eyes gleamed, not with wine, but with something he'd never glimpsed there. Acceptance, perhaps, or the first amber flicker of pride unmoored from Lannister coin. He touched the mirror's cool surface as though it were a threshold. Council convened in a vaulted hall. Marble columns painted with azure serpents supported a ceiling mosaic depicting Valyria before the doom. Around a crescent table sat Dario Naharis, Grey Worm, Missandei, 3 freedmen delegates representing Meereen's new guilds, and 2 Astapori emissaries det Winwai. Quilled scribes hunched over folios near the walls. Prince Quentyn Martell stood at the table's center, hawk-featured and sun-browned, wearing a cloak of coppery sand silk fastened by a brooch shaped like a blazing sun. His companions, a pair of lean Dornish knights and a robed Carthene merchant named Malaza, lingered at respectful distances. Whatever introductory pleasantries had transpired dissolved as Tyrion entered, flanked by Bronn and Podrick. Daenerys gestured. "Prince Quentyn, I present Lord Tyrion of House." She hesitated the briefest heartbeat. "Tyrion." Quentyn bowed curtly. "The imp. Tales of your cunning cross every sea." "Then Tuine." Tyrion inclined his head. "I trust only a third are true. Which third depends on whether you intend duel, dance, or dice." A faint smile teased Quentyn's lips, quickly quelled by gravity. "I come with offers, not gamble." The Carthene merchant stepped forward, rings clacking. "And I with ships to convey those offers, great queen. 13 great carracks, all swift, all eager to bear dragonfire vengeance westward." "Nab Sender." Tyrion lowered onto a cushioned chair sized for taller men. He felt a child at adult tables, except he'd long ago taught himself to command from such vantage. He steepled fingers. "Carracks seldom sail for charity. What price sauce sweetens this generosity?" Malaza's kohl-ringed eyes slid sideways. "A modest share of future tariffs, when Marine's harbors flourish under Targaryen security. Less than the Spicers demanded at Pentos when they funded your brothers. Peace be upon him. Escape. Or?" Daenerys rested her elbows on the table, braids draping. "Security such as dragons provide. I recall Korth once barred its gates to my people. Business thrives on fluid loyalties," Malaza confessed shamelessly. "Old disputes burn away in the flare of new ventures." Quentyn cleared his throat. "My queen and cousin, I come of Dorne, sworn to treat with you in hopes of alliance sealed by marriage." Dario's laughter barked, husky. "Another suitor for the Silver Queen's hand. Does Dorne send princes the way Kuhor sends steel?" "None." Quentyn's jaw tightened. "Dorne sends a promise of men, ships, and open ports on Westeros' southern coast. We know deserts, not unlike these Giscari plains. Your reclamation of Slaver's Bay impressed my father, Prince Doran. He believes the Seven Kingdoms must choose between stagnant lions and reborn dragons." Tyrion interjected pleasantly. "Some lions may yet remember how to adapt." Quentyn regarded him coolly. "Some lions maul merely because their pride is wounded." Tyrion saluted the thrust with lifted goblet. "Touché." The discussion spiraled into assessments of troop numbers, grain yields, harbor capacity. Tyrion listened, occasionally scribbling notes summarizing hidden costs. Malaza glossed over the carrack's previous capture by Volantine corsairs, a detail Tyrion teased out with an innocent query about bilge repairs. Meanwhile, the Dornish offer hinged on marriage, yet lacked clarity regarding which armies Quentyn could mobilize without his father's counsel's assent. As sun angled through lattice screens, Tyrion's focus wandered to images of dorsal spines cresting cloudbanks. Worlds collided atop that council floor, dusty realities of supply and politics with the raw possibilities etched by dragonfire into his soul. He sensed Daenerys felt the tension too. Her gaze drifted at intervals toward open windows, where thermals shimmered like half-visible invitations. When negotiations recessed for midday meal, Tyrion lingered beside Missandei's ledger Tarshawit. He pointed to marginalia regarding grain tribute from Lazar. "Double that figure if you plan to feed Dornish spearmen," he murmured. "Their appetites rival Dothraki." She penciled a note with appreciative nod. Outside hall doors Podrick waited, shifting weight from foot to foot. "And Lord," he whispered, "Bronn says to ask if we're still getting hazard pay." Tyrion patted his shoulder, gaze sweeping vaulted heights. "I believe we now occupy Hazard itself, Pod. Tell Bronn rates will adjust when we negotiate Hazard's surrender." Podrick blinked, accepted the koan, departed. Afternoon found Tyrion alone in a sunken garden atop the pyramid's northern buttress. Wind rattled palm fronds, orange blossoms perfumed the heat. He sprawled on a bench of glassy black stone, legs dangling. Above, Rhaegal circled lazily, silhouette carving halos through thin clouds. Each time the green dragon banked, the air tremored, and petals rained down in shimmering cascades. He closed his eyes. Memories of flight returned in visceral shards. The whip of gale over ears, the wrenching drop into dives, Daenerys' blend of command and exhilaration. Beneath those, older echoes stirred. Tywin's glacial stare, the chill marble of Casterly Rock's corridors. Childhood nights spent fantasizing of shape-shifting into eagles or krakens, anything more powerful than taunts. Now reality had delivered something grander than all illusions, yet with it came a weight heavier than dwarfhood's sneers. Expectation to wield such power wisely. Footsteps approached. Tyrion opened his eyes to find Varys ascending a side stair, robes fluttering. "It seems I missed quite the spectacle." Tyrion smirked. "Surprised your network did. I thought your little birds whistled at supersonic pitch." "They do," Varys conceded, settling onto the bench's far end. "But dragonflight outpaces gossip by at least half an hour." He folded hands. "How do you feel?" "Like I swallowed a comet, and it has not yet decided whether to burst or nest." Tyrion tugged a blossom loose from his beard. Varys' expression softened. "Rare. Genuine. Fire transforms everything it touches. Sometimes that is salvation. Sometimes immolation." Tyrion's gaze trailed to the horizon. "Tell me, old friend, do you believe blood alone calls dragons, or could choice bind them?" "Both," Varys said after a beat. "Blood may open the door, but what you do inside, that is choice. Dragons recognize will." His eyes sought Tyrion's. "I worry less for the beast's power, more for the man who rides him. Will he seek old grudges, or new beginnings?" Tyrion twirled the blossom stem until it snapped. "I spent decades seeking a father's nod and brother's camaraderie. Today a creature older than their line accepted me without condition. Old grudges feel small. Small things can still poison," Varys warned gently. "That is why I keep a master of antidotes close," Tyrion replied with half-smile. "But yes, caution. I intend to weigh each flame before striking spark." He leaned back. "First spark may come sooner than expected if Qarth and Dorne attempt to steer the queen with dangling purses." "Maladza's coffers are deep but rarely reliable," Varys agreed. "Qarthine entanglements often choke slower than chains, yet just as surely." A shadow swept garden tiles. Rhaegal soared overhead, banked, settled onto the pyramid's eastern ledge with a crash that rattled fronds. Tyrion watched as the dragon curled, wings mantling bones in statue stillness. Something inside Tyrion echoed the motion, a coil of energy relaxing. When evening's heat bled into cooler dusk, the council reconvened. Arguments sharpened as torchlight flickered around their faces. Daario doubted Qarth's loyalty. Grey Worm distrusted Dornish motives. The freedmen worried any foreign marriage would dilute the queen's devotion to their fragile freedom. Tyrion mediated, pivoting conversation to mutual defense pacts, absent nuptials. Quentyn rebuffed but listened keenly when Tyrion suggested a provisional supply corridor through Sunspear. Once Daenerys landed in Dorne, marriage deferred until victory gained. Maladza balked at deferred tariffs. Tyrion proposed immediate letters of credit underwritten by Taroshi banks, leveraging Qarth's reputation to secure better terms. The merchant's eyes glittered, insulted yet intrigued by profit. The session ended without resolution, but tensions eased. Daenerys signaled to Tyrion to linger. When others dispersed, she rose, stretching shoulders, bone-wearied. "Your words cut knots," she said. "Knots grow back," he replied. "We must cauterize, not merely slice." She regarded him warmly. "You speak as though fire is tool, not terror. Many fear it first." "Degner." Tyrion tapped his chest. "Once you've been terror to yourself, fire is clarity." Her smile faded into contemplation. "Tomorrow, I would fly again. Farther. Will you ride? Try dislodging me." "Good." She stepped close enough, he felt body heat. "There is a plateau of volcanic vents, 200 leagues east. Rhaegal feels called to such places. We depart at dawn." She touched his forearm, then slipped away, cloak whispering. Tyrion remained until torches guttered low, staring after shadows. Tomorrow, more sky. Within him, the comet wriggled, restless. The mutter of the pyramid's nighttime corridors accompanied Tyrion back toward his suite. Near the lion-headed fountain, a figure emerged. The mute guard assigned from Casterly Rock. The man's blank eyes found Tyrion's. He extended a folded scrap, wax-sealed with Lannister sigil. Tyrion accepted, brows tightened. The guard retreated into gloom. Inside his chambers, Tyrion broke the seal. The parchment contained but one line in Tywin's angular hand, clearly penned years earlier. I named you imp to cage you, yet still you seek the sky. Beware the fall. He stared until ink blurred. Where had the guard kept such a note? Had Tywin planned someday to give it, then reconsidered? Ghosts of paternal disdain whispered. Tyrion folded the message, tucked it into a pouch alongside Joanna's, and the ledger. Firelight behind the glass brazier caught the stack's edges, making them glow like ember pages. He poured a single finger of wine. To cage builders, he toasted, voice barely above breath. He drank, then doused the brazier and let darkness claim the room. Confident dawn would find him aloft again, rewriting every word his father ever spoke. Winter. Sunrise painted the desert east of Marine with bleeding carnelian, each dune crest casting spears of elongated shadow. Tyrion mounted Rhaegal with surer movements, muscle memory already budding. They lifted before the city fully stirred, Viserion pacing like a pale guardian overhead. Daenerys guided Drogon in a high spiral, a black eclipse blotting segments of sun. Together, the three dragons fanned eastward above the Skahazadhan's mouth. Then beyond cultivated deltas into arid steppe where only thorny scrub clung. Hour stacked upon hour. Heat shimmered off scales. Tyrion wrapped damp cloth across face to filter the wind. Twice great herds of wild zorses stampeded below, spooked by shadows crossing their prairie sky. The Dothraki outriders assigned to parallel their flight became specks far behind. Mid-afternoon revealed the volcanic plateau, a fractured wasteland of basalt fountains and smoking vents, black glass crusted around fissures where liquid rock cooled in jagged waves. Sparse vegetation grew phosphorescent green, feeding on mineral-rich steams. Dragons descended, talons skidding across brittle crust that cracked like thunder. Tyrion dismounted, legs braced. Sulfur stung nostrils, but beneath another scent coiled. Something heady, half metallic, half sweet, reminiscent of forges at Casterly Rock, yet layered with notes of lightning storms. Rhaegal prowled between steaming cracks, nostrils flaring, as though inhaling ancestral memory. Drogon roared once, claim laid, then folded wings to bask atop a slag mound. Daenerys approached Tyrion, wiping perspiration from brow. Here dragons feel the world's furnace. They remember Valyria Tywin. She knelt near a vent, fingers splayed to catch rising warmth. And here, she added, voice lower, I test new riders. Tyrion arched an eyebrow. Test. She pointed to a shallow crevasse, where molten rock glowed faint like banked coals. Stand there. He eyed the shimmering crack. Will I sink? Not if you trust me. Her tone bore no cruelty, only certainty. Dragons choose those who share their mettle. Feel the world as they do. Fire beneath, sky above. Tyrion exhaled, stepped onto a ledge inches from the glow. Heat licked soles through thick boots. He closed eyes. The roar of vents merged with pounding blood. He pictured the molten rivers deep under Valyria, forging dragons' bones. He pictured the cold crypt vault of Casterly Rock, where Lannister ancestors slept beneath gold. Hot and cold histories collided. Daenerys' hand touched his chest between ribs, light as falling ash. What do you feel? Pressure, he murmured. Layers of earth grinding, wanting release. Release it, she whispered. He inhaled slow, imagined channeling tension upward. In his mind, Rhaegal's heartbeat synchronized with his own. A gust tore across the plateau, swirling ash into spirals. The molten crack brightened. Tyrion's eyes snapped open as a gout of flame hissed upward, dancing along the vent before fading. Rhaegal answered with a resonant rumble. Daenerys smiled, satisfied. Connection grows. Tyrion swallowed, adrenaline prickling skin. Was that me? That was us, she corrected. Blood and choice, remember? She stepped back. Now let us see what words you would cast into fire. They spent hours practicing Valyrian commands across the plateau, using vents as markers. Tyrion's pronunciation stumbled, his tongue too short for elegant diphthongs, yet Rhaegal responded more to intent than clarity. Tail swish flattened pumice ridges, wing beats turned swirling ash devils into towering columns. When the sun knelt to horizon, they gathered at a sheltered alcove where geothermal heat warmed canvas tents pitched by advance outriders. There, Missandei waited with casks of water and trays of grilled goat, lightly seasoned with cumin. Tyrion devoured 2 portions, appetite ravenous from heat and exertion. Daenerys ate sparingly, gaze often drifting to Drogon, who kept watch from a ridge like a volcanic idol. Night draped its velvet, and stars ignited with desert clarity. Tyrion sat atop a boulder, legs swinging, wineskin in hand. Daenerys joined, wrapping a cloak around shoulders. Embers from a cook fire floated, reflecting in her violet eyes. "Tell me of your mother," she said. He blinked, caught off guard. "Joanna. Yes. I wish to know the woman who bore my cousin? Brother?" Her smile softened. "Whichever we prove." Tyrion swirled wine, watching stars refract in dark liquid. "I recall little firsthand. She died birthing me. I shaped my knowledge through servants' whispers and my father's silence." He inhaled desert coolness. "She was kind," they said. "She calmed Tywin's harsher edges. And she laughed, loud enough apparently to make the rock spats flee." Daenerys laughed softly at that. He continued, voice low. "He changed after she died. Whatever gentleness remained petrified. I suspect he saw me each day as the dagger that robbed him of her." He took a slow sip. "Yet her letter. Every loop still breathes hope." Daenerys laid a hand atop his. "She might have imagined you amid dragons. Perhaps. If she dared such fancy, I owe her to make it real." He glanced toward Rhaegal, who dozed beside Viserion, tails entwined like great serpent coils. "Tell me of your father not as Mad King scrawled by Robert's propagandists, but as the man you were told." She shifted, hair haloed by starlight. Viserys spoke of a father murdered by rebels, while daughter and infant son hid across the narrow sea. He painted tragedy, not madness. Bedtime tales of iron roses and heroes come late. She drew cloak tighter. Yet others whispered of cruelty. Wildfires beneath the Red Keep. Screams. I carry both images, a betrayed king and a flame-drunk tyrant. Which is true? Blood is no oracle. We must craft our own truths. Tyrion hummed. Agreed. He raised the wineskin in salute. To truths we craft. She tapped her water flask to the leather solemn ritual. They drank. Wind whistled across basalt. Vents exhaled quiet sighs. Dragons stirred, shadow vast against constellations. Tyrion followed the silhouette across sky. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw 3 dragons not of flesh, but of shimmering gold, soaring beside. The ghosts of Balerion, Meraxes, and Vhagar paying homage. Then, the mirage faded. Later in his tent, Tyrion tried penning musings about fire-forged identity, but ink smeared in sweat. Instead he stared at flickering lamplight until sleep took him. Dreams unfurled yet again. This time he flew alone upon Rhaegal over the Red Keep. Its towers blackened rubble, but peace lay below. Gardens blossoming where throne room once spread menace. Children ran laughing. He descended, landed. They crowded to touch Dragonscale. None feared him. One girl reached up, tracing his scarred brow with wonder, and said, "You brought spring." He woke before he could answer, heart aching with inexplicable joy. Yor. They broke camp at dawn, flying west. Clouds thickened, thunderheads bruising the horizon. Tyrion tasted rain on wind long before drops struck. Dragons climbed above the storm front, leveling within strata where lightning flickered like punished snakes. Rhaegal roared into the gale, daring it. Tyrion's cloak snapped violently. Rain stung cheeks in needle bursts. Yet exhilaration burned stronger than any chill. Electricity lit scales eerie green. Every thunderclap felt a salute. Mid-storm, Daenerys signaled a maneuver. They tucked wings, dropping through cloud layers into downpour. Visibility shrank to a cloak of liquid metal. Tyrion keenly sensed Rhaegal reading each swirling current, autopilot of instinct older than mortal seafaring. Lightning cracked somewhere behind, revealing Rhaegal's wingspan as a flash-etched cathedral roof. Then abruptly, sky cleared, a blue funnel between storm walls. At its center, an island of ruins loomed. Petrified spires, toppled arches, a ringed wall half submerged by lagoon water. The sight jarred Tyrion. Maps labeled no isle here. Rhaegal descended without command, as if drawn. They lit on moss-carpeted stone. Silence hung heavy. No birds cried. Statues weathered to near featurelessness jutted like sentinels. Tyrion dismounted, senses tingling. Daenerys eyed carvings on a cracked plinth, a tri-headed dragon, wings outstretched over wavy lines. Valyrian glyphs below read, "From flame we guard, to flame returned." "Dragonstone," Tyrion whispered, baffled. "Too far east," Daenerys replied. "This place is older." They advanced toward a central courtyard where shattered paving revealed a mosaic of glass tiles, colors still vivid beneath pooled rain. The image depicted dragons spiraling upward, encircling smaller winged forms. Wyverns? Below, stylized waves. A civilization that rode both sea and sky. Tyrion knelt, tracing edges of tile. Lost colony of Valyria. Daenerys crouched opposite, expression distant. Perhaps a refuge when doom consumed homeland. Mesiti. Lightning arced again, illuminating corners of courtyard where something gleamed. Heaps of blackened metal shaped like harness rings. Tyrion approached, heart thrashing. He brushed aside debris to expose a half-intact saddle. Dragon bone fused with fused bronze. Beneath lay skeletal remains, humanoid yet elongated, perhaps warped by centuries of mineral infusion. Charred shadows marked where fire once raged uncontrolled. "Final stand," Tyrion murmured. "They died with their dragons." He stood, throat tight. History's sudden proximity overwhelmed. Here lay evidence of forebears who fused ambition and flame until neither contained the other. Daenerys lifted the corroded ring. Lightning struck beyond ramparts, ozone scorched air. She released the artifact. It clanged hollowly. "Let us leave this tomb. We carry enough ghosts." They remounted, wings beating deluge into mist. Tyrion glanced back as clouds swallowed ruins. Columns flickered, then vanished. Secrets of Ash Age would remain drowned. Storm broke west of Meereen. Dragons glided toward the pyramid, scales glistening like freshly quenched steel. Dockworkers paused, hauling netted fish to watch silent approach. On landing terrace, Grey Worm awaited with uneasy stance. At his side stood a man Tyrion recognized instantly, despite 10 years aging and dusted snow in beard. "Sir Barristan, Selmy." The old knight bowed to Daenerys, then to Tyrion, eyes wide. "Lord Tyrion, you fly a dragon now? The realm will quake at rumor." Tyrion slid stiffly from saddle, joints aching. "Rumors seldom capture half of any saga, sir. Good to see an honest sword still swings." Nedstead and Lyre. Barristan's gaze flicked between queen and new rider. "You may soon need more swords." Ravens arrived. Yunkai forges alliance with new Githis and Astapors, surviving masters. They muster fleets. Tyrion sighed, exchanging glance with Daenerys. Dawn's exhilaration cooled into strategic calculus. The dragons gave them terror's edge, but armies and supply lines decide campaigns after initial flames. Daenerys gestured toward the council stairs. "Summon everyone. Tonight, we plan war." Melperndi. As the entourage moved, Tyrion lingered beside Rhaegal, resting forehead to scale. "Battle approaches, old friend," he whispered. The dragon's eye half-lidded, unperturbed, as if war were but weather he could carve aside with wings. Tyrion envied that certainty, yet felt his own spine steel. He joined the procession descending into the pyramid's heart. When torches flared alive along colonnades and echoing footsteps merged, Tyrion sensed the deep rhythms of forthcoming hours. Sleepless nights, drafting supply charts, heated debate with captains, mapping kill corridors for dragons, while sparing freedmen farms. Work he understood intimately. Difference was, now he wielded not only ink and silver tongues, but the sky's fiercest child. In the council chamber, maps unfurled. Yunkai's position, troop counts, sailing times. Grey Worm reported unsullied strength. Dario offered Dothraki cavalry numbers. Quentin returned with revised Dornish terms, minus immediate marriage. Malazza, smelling profit in conflict, pledged Carracks as troop carriers for a share of Astapor's port fees once captured. Tyrion moderated, coaxing commitments into firm lines, forging timelines. Hours stretched. Candle stubs died. New tapers replaced. At one lull, Tyrion felt weight settle on shoulder. Daenerys' hand. "Rest soon," she murmured. A commander's mind dulls without sleep. He nodded but traced one last notation. "After we secure New Gias, we must garrison, not merely sack. Otherwise, rebellion will sprout by next winter." "Namwine," she considered, then signaled a scribe. "Add it." Finally, she dismissed council minutes before dawn's first gleam. Members dispersed. Stiff-limbed, Tyrion gathered parchments into bundles, rolling quills into cloth. Daenerys lingered. "You shape plans swiftly. It helps to have fewer bones to gnaw," he quipped. Seriousness chased humor. "But dragons alone cannot hold kingdoms. Governance must sprout in their wake." She studied him. "I named you hand in my mind hours ago. Will you accept when I speak it aloud?" His heart skipped. He bowed as deep as his spine allowed. "With honor." She smiled tiredly. "Sleep, hand." She turned to leave, then paused. "And thank you." "For what?" "For believing sky could hold you." She vanished through archway, footsteps fading. Tyrion stood alone in ring of candles, parchments heavy under arm. He glanced toward terrace where faint glow hinted sunrise. Another day, another battle to orchestrate. Yet beneath fatigue paraded a different awareness. No longer the imp scuttling in margins, but a man whose choices curved dragons, flight paths, and kingdoms, futures alike. He strode into corridor, heading for brief bed, hearing once more the promise Rhaegal's heartbeat carved through wind. Mine. Ours. And Tyrion knew that whatever fires tomorrow demanded, he would meet them, not as caged dwarf or scorned Lannister, but as rider, as hand, as architect of flame-wrought dawns yet to blaze across the world. Night over Meereen fell in slow blue increments, the city's low walls and sprawl of houses softening to a series of glowing embers. On the great pyramid's summit, 100 torches guttered, yellow and hot, as Tyrion shuffled alone across the broad wind-lit terrace. He could not sleep. War and possibility turned within his chest, churning each time he thought of the armies massing in Yunkai or the dragons asleep, only a few feet behind stone. He paused near the edge, watching the slow dance of lights in the streets, the distant river's silver tongue reflecting the moon. Somewhere behind him, the click and shuffle of boot on stone. Podrick, bearing a steaming mug. "And Lord," the boy offered quietly, voice soft enough to fade into the breeze. "You should rest. Bronn says you'll turn to ash if you keep burning your candle at both ends." Tyrion smiled, accepting the mug. Bronn is a philosopher of economy. He always prefers his problems solved by coin or steel. He sipped, savoring the clove and cinnamon, one of Daenerys's new imports from the liberated ports. "But even Bronn will have to wait. Strategy is not a lamp you can snuff out for the night." Podrick hesitated, fiddling with a button on his tunic. "You're not afraid of tomorrow, then? Of war or of flying again?" Tyrion replied. He saw Podrick's face cloud, so he clapped him gently on the shoulder. "The answer is yes. Only a madman would claim otherwise. But sometimes, Pod, you must climb onto the dragon anyway." He took another sip and pointed to the city. "See those lanterns? The way they cluster in squares and run in lines down to the river? That's where the merchants prepare to flee, the rich who think gold can keep them safe when spears and arrows start flying. But look there. See the clusters near the outer walls? That's where freedmen drill and old women distribute grain. They know they cannot run. Their hope is here, on the pyramid, in the sky above them. That is a heavier burden than fear. Man. Podrick nodded. Silent. Tyrion gestured him to go. He needed the hush to think, to feel the fullness of what had changed since Rhaegal had let him ride. Alone again, he drew the letter from Joanna Lannister, the copy of the Valyrian glyphs, and Tywin's note from the Mute Guard. They felt like artifacts from another life, but together, they were now the root of his identity. He traced his mother's words and looked skyward. "Did you know, Mother?" he murmured. "Did you know that one day I'd ride a dragon, that my blood would call me out of the depths and into the sky?" He closed his eyes. In his mind he saw her, not as a stately lady of court, but as a warm shadow, arms outstretched, hair the same gold as his but wreathed with fire, laughing in some summer field he'd never visited. A gust caught the papers. He snatched them up before the wind could carry away history. Behind, the dragons shifted. Rhaegal raised his head, eyes opening into narrow emerald slits. Watching, always watching. There was kinship there, Tyrion realized. Not just in blood or in the echo of ancient magic, but in the shared solitude. Two creatures set apart by birth and expectation, meeting at last at the crossroads of fate. Later, as the last lanterns in the city winked out, Tyrion turned and made his way to the council chamber, where Daenerys and her advisors waited. The room was alive with tension and the scent of burning oil. Varys stood near a map, Barristan Selmy in polished mail, Dario with arms folded, his eyes glittering with reckless energy. Missandei wrote notes in her flowing hand, and Grey Worm's presence anchored the group, silent but certain. Quentyn Martell was present, shoulders taut, his two knights standing behind him with Dornish cool. Daenerys looked up as Tyrion entered. "Have you slept?" she asked, and there was something gentle in her voice, even as her posture radiated queenly command. "A nap upon a dragon's wing, perhaps," Tyrion quipped, but his eyes stayed serious as he joined the circle. "You wish to plan the battle?" She nodded. "Ravens from the outlying patrols report the Yunkai are 3 days' march from the river. Their allies muster on the plains east. The Giscari send chariots, and Astapor sends mercenaries. Their numbers double ours, but they have no answer for what we command in the sky." "Numbers are a poor shield against fire," Dario said, his lips twisting into a grin. Tyrion took his seat, spreading the latest scouts reports across the table. "Numbers mean little if we control the field. The dragons are our hammer, but we must also forge an anvil. If we leave the city and fight on open ground, we risk encirclement and a long campaign. But if we force them to besiege Meereen, they starve themselves and become easy prey for fire from above." "Memper Noir," Quentyn spoke, voice respectful but sharp. "You would cower behind the walls?" Tyrion met his gaze. "I would bleed them before they reach the walls, harry them day and night, let them spend themselves. The dragons will strike, yes, but not all at once. We strike at their foragers, burn their baggage trains, sow fear. Let them feel the shadow overhead every waking moment. When they are desperate, only then do we invite them to battle, on ground of our choosing." "Nay." Barristan nodded approval. It was much the way Rhaegar fought at the Trident, though he lacked dragons. Harass, bleed, and strike when they are exhausted. Grey Worm stepped forward, voice low. "Unsullied can defend the city. We make small sorties at night, kill sentries, vanish. If the Dothraki ride with us—" "They will," Dario confirmed, flashing a wolfish smile. Daenerys surveyed the room, weighing every counsel. "What about the freedmen?" she asked Missandei, whose insight into the people's mood she valued above all. Missandei set down her stylus. "They will stand. They see this as the battle that will decide whether their children live as men or return to chains. They do not fear the Yunkai. They only fear that the world may forget them if you are gone." Tyrion looked at Daenerys. "Then we fight not only for the city, but for the hope that has grown here. Hope no army can break with iron alone." You must be seen. Flying, leading, making the promise of freedom visible from every rooftop. Nanise. Daenerys' eyes glimmered, the shadow of Rhaegar's tragedy passing behind them. You will fly with me, she said to Tyrion. And all at the table understood it was both an order and a recognition. 2 Targaryens. 2 dragons, side by side. As the meeting ended, Quentyn lingered. Tyrion poured himself a fresh goblet, and motioned for him to speak. Quentyn hesitated, then spoke quietly. Dorne will remember this. When the news reaches Sunspear, they will know dragons have returned. They will know you too. Demisal. Tyrion shrugged. Let them know what they wish. My only loyalty is to the Queen and the future we build together. He considered, then added, if you wish to serve her, serve well. But remember, there is more to the game than winning battles. There is the peace after. Quentyn studied him, as if searching for some deeper meaning, then nodded, and withdrew. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Tyrion found himself more alive than he'd ever been, reviewing defenses, instructing captains, riding through the streets with Missandei to gather the freedmen, even walking the markets with Podrick, listening to the murmur of the city, the pulse of its heart. Each night he climbed the terrace and stood with Rhaegal, feeling the great beast's breath warming the darkness, knowing himself kin not only by blood, but by choice. When the morning of battle came, it did not come as a trumpet blast but as a creeping certainty. The sense of approaching storm in every mind, in the hurried steps of soldiers, in the hollow ring of hooves, in the courtyards. Tyrion donned his armor, a breastplate inlaid with 3-headed dragons over the Lannister crimson, as if to declare the union of his blood for all to see. Podrick fastened the straps with shaking hands. You'll come back? Podrick asked, eyes wide, voice on the edge of breaking. Tyrion ruffled his hair. If I fall, Rhaegal will carry me home. But I have every intention of drinking wine with you by sunset. He glanced to Bronn, who waited in the corridor with a crooked grin and a sword polished brighter than the dawn. Keep him out of trouble, will you? Bronn winked. If trouble finds you, I'll make sure it pays for the privilege. They made their way to the terrace, where Daenerys already waited in armor the color of nightfall, hair braided in the Targaryen style, with Drogon pacing restlessly behind her. The other dragons prowled the periphery, their massive forms casting shadows that flickered in the wind. She met Tyrion's gaze. You are ready? He nodded, heart thundering. Then mount. Today we show them that the age of dragons has not ended. Tyrion mounted Rhaegal with practiced ease. The dragon shifted under him, and at the touch of his hand, the scales vibrated, a living drumbeat echoing his own. Daenerys climbed onto Drogon, Viserion coiling behind her. The city below erupted in cheers as the dragons took to the sky. 3 shapes against the rising sun. The Yunkai army moved on the plain beyond the river, banners whipping red and gold. Tyrion could see their formations, a sea of men in bronze, siege towers lumbering at the rear, chariots circling the flanks. But already the plan was in motion. Dothraki outriders harried the supply lines. Unsullied squads struck at night, burning tents and slaughtering scouts. Tyrion signaled Rhaegal with a pressure of his knees and a whispered command. The dragon banked, following Drogon's lead. Below, panic erupted in the ranks as fire lanced from the sky, columns of black smoke blooming wherever the dragons passed. Yet they did not attack head-on. Not yet. Instead, Tyrion directed Rhaegal to strafe the edges, incinerating food stores, terrifying horses, setting siege engines ablaze. He saw Daenerys circling above, Drogon roaring, wings casting a shadow that made even veteran mercenaries cower. Viserion dove beside them, torching the riverbank where boats attempted to ferry in reinforcements. The sound was a storm, a symphony of fear, fire, and wings. When the Yunkai finally massed for a full assault, Tyrion brought Rhaegal higher, readying for the final blow. He surveyed the chaos below, calculating, seeking the breaking point. He saw gray worms unsullied hold the gate, the freedmen forming ranks behind barricades, and Dothraki sabers flashing in and out of the melee. Now, he thought. Now is the time. He leaned forward, whispered, Dracarys, and Rhaegal unleashed a torrent of green fire upon the enemy's heart, shattering the center of their force. Drogon followed, a tidal wave of flame. The Yunkai broke, their will collapsing. Many threw down weapons and fled. The mercenaries tried to hold, but as Viserion landed in their midst, all courage vanished. It was over by noon. The field was a mosaic of ruin and flame. Tyrion circled above once, then guided Rhaegal down, landing amid a ring of Unsullied who greeted him with awe. Daenerys landed beside him, dismounting with regal grace. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Tyrion saw reflected in hers not only victory, but kinship, of a kind that went beyond blood or conquest. He dismounted, nearly stumbling on numb legs, but the hands of the freedmen steadied him. Cheers erupted. Daenerys lifted her sword, and the cry of "Misa" rose from 1,000 throats. Tyrion felt tears sting his eyes, not for victory, but for the hope blooming in that chorus, the hope he had helped defend. They spent the day securing the city, hunting down stragglers, healing the wounded. Tyrion moved from the walls to the markets to the pyramids, issuing orders, consulting with captains, writing missives to distant allies. The labor was endless, but he welcomed it. It kept his mind sharp, kept fear and memory at bay. Late that night, he returned to the terrace. The city below still burned in places, but the fires were under control. Rhaegal curled beside him, wings folded, eyes half-lidded with contentment. Tyrion settled on the stone back to the warm scales, and watched the stars appear, one by one. Daenerys joined him, silent for a time. Then she spoke. "You have saved my city, perhaps my reign." Tyrion shrugged, unwilling to accept praise. "You saved it, Khaleesi. I was only your second set of wings." She smiled. "A clever set of wings. I could not have done it without you." He thought of Tywin's note, the words written in neat, angry lines. "Beware the fall." He thought of his mother's letter, the hope in her script. He thought of the dragon he now called his own. "I think," he said slowly, "that for the first time, I am not afraid of falling. Not while I can fly." Daenerys touched his shoulder, her hand warm and steady. "Then fly with me. Help me reclaim the 7 kingdoms." Tyrion turned to look at her. The moonlight limned her face, made her seem as ethereal and implacable as legend. "Ay, my queen," he said softly. "For fire, for blood, for hope." She stood, and he rose with her. Together, they looked out over the city. Tyrion felt the future open before him, as wide and as wild as the sky itself. He did not know what would come: war, betrayal, loss, or triumph. But he knew now that he was not the sum of his father's scorn, nor of the accident of his birth. He was the child of dragon and lion, breaker of chains, rider of storms. And as the dragons stirred behind them, as the city healed beneath their watch, Tyrion Targaryen knew at last what it meant to belong. Not to a house or a name, or even a crown, but to the story and to the flight, and to the future yet unwritten. The days that followed were filled with rebuilding, counsel, and the subtle shaping of a new order. Letters went to Dorne, to the Iron Islands, to Old Town and the North. Some came in reply, cautious or curious, but all marked by the same new note. The dragons had returned, and so had the blood of old Valyria. Many feared it. Some coveted it. A few saw the hope in it. Tyrion sat often with Daenerys and her inner circle, plotting the path to Westeros, weighing each ally and enemy, every rumor and opportunity. At night, he walked the corridors of the pyramid, sometimes alone, sometimes with Varys, sometimes with Podrick listening in quiet awe as Tyrion spun plans and stories, warnings and hopes. He wrote to Sansa in the north, careful and warm, sending news of his fate and a request for alliance. He wrote to Samwell Tarly at the Wall, seeking wisdom from the archives of the Citadel. Each letter was a thread cast across the known world, weaving a net of possibilities, a tapestry of destinies. In private, he visited Rhaegal, learning the dragon's moods, his hungers, and his patience. There were times when he soared over the desert, letting the wind strip his mind bare. feeling for once the absence of shame. In those hours he allowed himself to imagine not only survival but greatness, not only power but peace. One evening, as dusk painted the river violet and the city's new banners fluttered in the breeze, Tyrion stood with Daenerys at the highest parapet. "We will go to Westeros soon," she said. "Yes," Tyrion agreed, his voice certain. "Do you believe we will win?" He thought for a long moment. "I believe we can change the world. Whether it will thank us or destroy us, that is for the world to decide. But yes, I believe we can win. So long as we do not become the monsters we seek to dethrone." "Namsan." She studied him, then smiled. "That is why I chose you." He smiled back, genuine and without reservation. "And I you, Khaleesi." She laughed then, clear and bright, echoing down the stone stairs. Tyrion looked out over Meereen, over the river, over the campfires in the distance, where the remnants of defeated armies licked their wounds, and pondered new futures. He thought of his mother, of his father, of the life he had left behind. He thought of the dragon at his back, of the sky above, of the queen at his side. He thought too of the battles yet to come, and the choices that would define him, not as a Lannister, nor as an imp, nor even as a Targaryen, but as himself. And as the stars blazed one by one, Tyrion Targaryen, rider of dragons, hand of the queen, breaker of old chains, smiled into the dark, certain for the first time in his life that his story was only just beginning. The moon waned above Meereen, casting a cold, silvered hush over the city that seemed to muffle the bustle of carpenters, the drills of freedmen militia, and the last wild laughter of Dothraki riders too restless for sleep. Tyrion stood beneath the stars, hands clasped behind his back, watching the black shadow of Rhaegal sprawled on the terrace tiles, green scales rippling faintly as the dragon's lungs rose and fell. He let the moment settle, drawing comfort from the deep, ancient breaths, echoes of Valyria itself, before turning to the ledge to gaze east, toward the dark sea, and the lands beyond it that filled his dreams each night. It had been weeks since the war with Yonkai's allies. The city had changed. Life swelled through its markets. Children darted through alleys with little fear, and banners of red and black fluttered from each gate. Daenerys' justice was swift and visible. Former masters labored now alongside their freed slaves to repair walls and aqueducts, watched always by the silent, unwavering Unsullied. Yet the city was restless beneath the surface. Tyrion saw it in the wary eyes of the old merchant class. The rumors that drifted in from the north about Lannister victories at Casterly Rock, the news of Euron Greyjoy's ironborn raiders sweeping east along the coasts of Westeros. Ravens brought news of Jon Snow crowned king in the north, of Sansa ruling at his side. Word of Aegon, false or true, the stories differed, circulated among Volantene sailors and Corthine merchants. And through it all, Tyrion felt himself at the center of a gathering storm. He was more than Hand now, more than Daenerys' trusted voice or the novelty of a dragon rider. In the eyes of Meereen and the wider world, he was the living proof that the Targaryen legacy ran deeper and wider than any had guessed. Some whispered, "Bastard prince." Some, "The dragon's little lion." In the taverns, the story had grown with each telling. How Tyrion had flown at Daenerys' side to break the Yunkai host. How he had burned their warships and sent the Dothraki charging through fields of ash. How the dragons themselves had bowed to him. He found himself the recipient of quiet petitions from old families, less overt than those Daenerys endured, but insistent. Women of the East and North both, seeking the prestige of a union with a Targaryen prince. Lannister kin from Lannisport, pleading for his word with the queen to spare their caravans. Even some minor lords from Westeros, smelling a shift in the wind, wrote cautiously. Would he speak to Daenerys on their behalf, if she came to claim the Iron Throne? But it was not ambition that kept Tyrion awake at night. It was the memory of Rhaegal's first wild flight over open ocean, of Daenerys' voice echoing across the sky, and of the future growing closer, inexorable, each day. On a windless midnight, he summoned Podrick and Bronn to his solar. The walls hung with tapestries from the Giscari age. the windows flung open to admit cool river breezes. Bronn came first, whistling as he entered, his eyes flickering across the wine bottles on the table. "You look like a man who's either going to war or about to run away from one," Bronn observed, collapsing into a cushioned chair. Tyrion poured him a cup. "Neither for the moment. But I have questions I trust only you and Podrick to answer honestly." Podrick arrived a heartbeat later, his face earnest. "Lord." Tyrion gestured to the map spread across the table. They showed the Bay of Dragons, the southern coasts of Westeros, and every city from Astapor to Volantis. "If you had to guard a queen who was flying into the jaws of half the world's armies, what would you want to know?" Bronn grinned. "That I had a very fast horse, and even faster friends." Podrick peered at the maps, serious. "I'd want to know where her friends were, and where her enemies might hide, where the food and water would come from, where she could land safe if her dragons were hurt." Tyrion nodded, smiling. "Wisdom comes in unexpected packages. Pod, go to the docks at dawn. Listen to what the sailors say about storms and currents, about who comes and goes. Find out if any captains are selling their ships, or if any are brave enough to sail with us to Westeros when the time comes. Bronn, speak to Dario and the Dothraki Tower. I want to know which of their blood riders are loyal to Daenerys, and which might follow only strength. And if any new sellsword companies have arrived from the west, I want their names and captains. I trust you both more than most of the advisors she's been saddled with." "Nay, monsieur." Bronn took his cup, saluted with a smirk, and left with the air of a man going to a festival rather than an assignment. Podrick lingered, then bowed and vanished into the corridor. Left alone, Tyrion stared down at the coiled dragon carved into his ring, at the lines and borders of a world so often divided by blood and fire. He closed his eyes. He remembered a child's longing for acceptance, the bruises and slights, the hollowing years in his father's shadow. Now, in Meereen, he felt the shadow's shape shifting, not vanishing but shrinking with every new day he shaped with his own hands. The next morning brought an unexpected summons. Daenerys had called her council to the Hall of 100 Columns, a chamber built by the ancient Giscari to awe both slaves and kings. Tyrion found her there, sunlight blazing off the marble, her hair loose about her shoulders, her presence incandescent. The council included Grey Worm, Missandei, Dario, Varys, Quentyn Martell, Barristan, and, in a new twist, several representatives of the Meereenese freedmen, and even 2 former slavers, each bound by oaths of fealty and the threat of unsullied swords. She nodded as Tyrion entered, motioning him to her right. "The time has come," she began, her voice clear. "Westeros lies in chaos. Reports say the Lannisters and the Tyrells are at war with the Faith Militant. The North is holding against the Boltons. And in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister sits the Iron Throne, surrounded by enemies on every side. Now is our moment. We must decide how, and when, to sail." "The bearers." Dario leaned in, twirling a dagger. "We have ships, thanks to Qarth and Tyrosh. We have dragons. We could be in Westeros within a moon's turn." Varys interjected, soft but certain. "But there are rumors of Aegon, the young dragon, with Golden Company banners in the Stormlands. His claim may split our would-be allies. And Euron Greyjoy has the Iron Fleet. No safe landfall on the western shores unless we win the sea." "Ninen." Quentyn Martell's voice was calm. "Dorne is ready to rise for you, but my father's envoys insist you must come yourself. They will not move for a raven alone." Tyrion listened, eyes narrowed, as the council debated. Daenerys' supporters wanted to strike hard, to appear with fire and steel, and sweep all before her. The freedmen's delegates worried about the city's fate if Daenerys left, the chance that old slaver houses or outside enemies would return. Even Barristan looked torn. Duty to Queen and blood warring with the memory of failed invasions past. When Daenerys turned to him, Tyrion spoke softly, but with steel. "Your enemies in Westeros expect dragons. They expect fire, terror, conquest. That is your greatest weapon, and your greatest risk. If you arrive as a conqueror, the fearful will unite against you. But if you arrive as a liberator, bearing justice, allies will flock to your banner. He pointed to the map. We cannot hold Meereen and conquer Westeros at once. But we can give Meereen the means to defend itself. Council rule, with the unsullied as guardians, and the promise that you will return if threatened. Then we sail not west, but south, to Dorne. The Martells will support you. We rally the Reach, then move north. We win hearts, as well as castles. And all the while, we let word of 2 dragon riders, true Targaryens, spread like wildfire across the kingdoms. By the time you face Cersei, her friends will be few, her armies weakened, her will broken by fear and rumor. Daenerys' eyes glinted. And if Aegon is truly my kin? Tyrion spread his hands. Blood or no, you have 3 dragons. No sellsword prince, no matter his name, can claim that. But offer him parley. If he is your kin and true, perhaps he serves you. If not, you prove to Westeros that you are no butcher, but a queen who values her house. The room fell silent. Daenerys looked around, gauging the faces of her followers. At last, she nodded. So be it. We make preparations to leave for Dorne. Tyrion, you will oversee the transfer of authority to the Council of Meereen. Grey Worm, the Unsullied will remain as guardians. Missandei, you will serve as my voice in council. Dario, prepare the Dothraki. Quentyn, send your ravens to Sunspear. Tell your father his queen comes soon. The next days moved in a blur. Tyrion worked without rest, drafting new charters for Meereen, ensuring the city's markets would remain open, arranging for garrisons at the river gates and new laws to prevent the slavers from regaining power. He met with every merchant and freedman counselor who mattered, quelling their fears, spinning promises of trade and peace. At night he returned to Rhaegal, flying with Daenerys above the city, over the river, out to the open plains. He learned to control the dragon's bursts of flame, to trust in the wind and the great beast's instincts. Each flight lessened the weight of his past, each night sky a reminder that he was remade. On the last evening before departure, Tyrion stood with Missandei on the steps of the council hall, the city alive with torches, music, and wild hope. "Will you miss it?" she asked, her voice as gentle as the southern breeze. "I will," Tyrion admitted, surprising himself. "I never thought to find home so far from Casterly Rock, or to have a part in building something better than my father's world." She smiled. "Then you must build it in Westeros." He pressed her hand, then walked back to the terrace for one last night's sleep in Meereen. That night, he dreamed of dragons circling the towers of King's Landing, of a throne of swords melting beneath fire, and of laughter, his mother's, Daenerys, his own, echoing through halls where no Lannister ever laughed before. Dawn came bright and full of wind. The fleet assembled in the bay, 30 carracks from Korth and Tyrosh, a dozen galleys crewed by volunteers from the Summer Isles, and half the old Meereenese navy, its decks crowded with unsullied Dothraki and hundreds of hopeful freedmen. Daenerys stood on the prow of her flagship, Drogon perched on the mainmast, regal and Viserion, circling overhead. Tyrion stood beside her, Podrick and Bronn at his side, his armor shining with the triple dragon and lion sigils. The ships raised anchor and slid from the harbor, a fleet as great as any since the Doom. As the coast faded, Daenerys turned to him, her voice low. "Are you afraid?" He considered, then shook his head. "Only of failing, but not of the journey. Not anymore." She squeezed his hand. "You have become more than you dreamed, Tyrion." He smiled. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I only finally became myself." The voyage to Dorne was swift. Winds were with them, and the dragons above scattered any pirate or corsair foolish enough to approach. Each night, Tyrion sat with Daenerys and her closest captains, reviewing plans, writing letters. Quentyn's news was good. The Martells would meet them at Sunspear with food, horses, and fresh troops. Tyrion drafted treaties, securing not only Dornish spears but the loyalty of old houses. Fowler, Dane, Yarnwood, eager for a Targaryen queen. When the fleet neared Sunspear, the people lined the walls and beaches, awed by the dragons overhead. Dorne had not seen such pageantry since the days of Princess Nymeria. The Martells greeted Daenerys with honor. Tyrion, too, was received as kin, though the stares from some of the old lords reminded him that not all wounds between houses heal easily. In Sunspear's shadowed gardens, plans were laid. Daenerys met with Jon Connington, the old Griff, who confessed his doubts about the young Griff Aegon, whose blood was a secret known to few. Varys worked behind the scenes, sending ravens to the Reach, the Stormlands, even to the north. Tyrion wrote daily to Sansa, negotiating with a hand as deft as any knight's blade. She replied at last, agreeing to parley should Daenerys' army reach the Riverlands. He wrote too to Samwell Tarly, whose own influence was growing at Oldtown. In every word Tyrion spun the promise of something new, a world not ruled by fear, but by those who understood its cost. At last the march began. Daenerys rode at the head of her army, her dragons above, her banners rippling beside the son of Dorne. Tyrion rode beside her on a swift sand steed, armor glinting, Bronn and Podrick in tow. Their route took them through the Red Mountains, past villages awed into silence by the sight of dragons, past ruins where old houses once ruled. Every night, Tyrion met with Daenerys and the lords of Dorne, refining plans, settling disputes. He handled quarrels with the Reach's envoys, soothed the pride of Dothraki Khals, assured the Unsullied of their new role in the kingdoms. News came daily. Cersei's forces skirmished with the Faith militant. The Tyrells held Highgarden but faced rebellion from lesser houses. Euron Greyjoy raided the western coast. Aegon took Griffin's Roost and was declared king by Stormlander lords, though his cause faltered in the face of Daenerys' approach. Tyrion guided Daenerys to parley, with Aegon outside Storm's End, the two supposed Targaryens facing each other, on neutral ground. Daenerys, regal and unyielding. Aegon, young, earnest, well-spoken. Their words danced, but it was clear to Tyrion. Aegon lacked dragons, and whatever his blood, the lords followed Daenerys. In the end, they made peace. Aegon would hold Storm's End, swearing fealty to the Queen. The Golden Company would join Daenerys' cause, their loyalty purchased by hope and gold alike. As the army marched north, banners gathered. Tyrell green and gold, Martell red, the Stag of Baratheon, the Sunburst of Hightower, even some houses of the Westerlands and Riverlands who dared defy Cersei. Tyrion's letters paved the way, each word a promise or warning, each argument grounded in hard-won truth. The approach to King's Landing was slow and measured. No storming the city, Tyrion counseled caution. They blockaded the city, cut off supplies, let the world see that this was not conquest, but justice come at last. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei raged, her power crumbling. Tyrion received word from Jaime, now Hand of the Queen, but torn by loyalty and guilt. Jaime pleaded for mercy for the people. Tyrion wrote back, "Open the gates, and the city will be spared. Resist, and the city will burn." Demon. At dawn, as dragons circled the spires of the city, Tyrion rode with Daenerys and her captains to the gates. There, on the steps of the city, Jaime and the Gold Cloaks surrendered. The bells tolled, not in mourning, but in hope. The city, starved and desperate, greeted Daenerys and her dragons not as conquerors but as deliverers. Inside the throne room, Daenerys ascended the Iron Throne, cautious, grave. Tyrion stood at her side, Rhaegal roaring in the courtyard beyond. He saw in her face both joy and burden. She turned to him as the lords knelt. "Rise, Lord Tyrion Targaryen," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Hand of the Queen, rider of Rhaegal, brother of the dragon's blood, you have brought me home." He knelt, overwhelmed. All that he had been, the despised son, the clever imp, the scorned advisor, fell away. Here, at last, he was himself. The days that followed were not easy. There were riots to quell, food to distribute, old enemies to judge, and sometimes forgive. Tyrion worked day and night, rewriting laws, overseeing justice, restoring order. Bronn became commander of the city guard. Podrick squired for Tyrion, learning as much from the city's streets as from the council chamber. Sansa arrived from the north, standing proud, her hair streaked with silver at the temple. Their reunion was awkward at first, but soon it softened, and Sansa offered an alliance. The North would remain free, but would stand with Daenerys against any foe. The people of King's Landing learned to trust again. New markets flourished, temples were rebuilt, the poor fed. The banners of dragon and lion flew together, side by side. Tyrion stood often in the Red Keep's highest tower, Rhaegal perched nearby, the wind rippling through his hair. He looked out over the city, past the smoking ruins and the shining spires, and saw not just the shadow of his father or the ghosts of old kings, but the bright, uncharted horizon of a new world. At night, he sat with Daenerys on the balcony, drinking wine, talking of law and love, and the future. They shared dreams, hopes, laughter, and sometimes when the city was quiet, they flew together on dragonback, high above the world, unbound by fear or the old divisions of blood. One night, as they soared above the river, Tyrion looked over at Daenerys, her hair streaming, her eyes alight with purpose. "Will we keep it?" he asked, not meaning the throne but the peace they'd built. She looked at him, her voice as certain as the beating of the dragon's wings. "If we fly together, nothing can bring us down." He smiled, feeling, at last, complete. The night deepened, the dragons glided, and the city slept below, held safe by hope, by fire, and by the wisdom of those who had learned, at last, to rise above all that had come before. Okay. Continue the story 5,000 words or more. No subtitles, write narrative script, only no subtitles. Indebananti. Sao himon wisambo, tanki. You. Continue the story 5,000 words or more. No subtitles, write narrative script, only no subtitles.